hit record. So welcome everybody. Today we're going to be speaking on how to get our gardens ready for spring. My name is Taylor. I am the Greenhouse and Learning Center Coordinator with Equal Ground, and I'm very happy to be here on behalf of Grand River Council on Aging. So today we're going to be talking about who we are, who is Equal Ground. We're going to be speaking about backyard gardening. We'll talk about green space access within the city of Brantford and Brant County. And we're also going to talk about how you can get involved. So Equal Ground Community Gardens was established in 2015, but our roots go back to 2009. We started on a small personal property in Eagle Place, and then we also had a community garden located at Brantwood Farms. Equal Ground was the amalgamation of two existing organizations that had similar missions. So we incorporated a couple of years ago, and in 2015 had established a partnership with the city of Brantford. So we have two main programs here at Equal Ground. The first one is our community garden program. Later in the presentation, I will be showing you a map of all of our locations. So we work with the city of Brantford as well as the county of Brant to operate and facilitate 19 public gardens and 10 private gardens. So the public gardens are located on parks, the library, certain church properties. These gardens invite anybody from the community to come out and participate in harvesting and taking care of the gardens themselves. We're unlike other community garden initiatives that will rent out plots. We don't do plot rentals here with Equal Ground. It is all community based. So any community member, regardless of where you live, regardless of your experience, or your socioeconomic status, anybody is welcome to participate. And all of the gardens are open to the public. Nothing is gated, so anybody is welcome to come through and help themselves to harvest. Each garden is oversaw by a team of volunteers as well as a garden champion, and they just ensure that the gardens are tended to throughout the season. And then if there is any leftover produce that has not been harvested, it is donated to the food bank. To date, Equal Ground has donated roughly 15,000 pounds of food. This metric can be very difficult to capture, but places that we donate to, they'll actually weigh it for us and report it back to us annually. We have not received 2022 numbers, however. So that's our main program. Of course, when the pandemic hit, a lot of our sites actually closed and volunteers and community members were unable to access the gardens for a time. So our second program, the Host Garden program, was born. In 2020, we had over 60 participants for this program. So this is where community members can will provide them with support to set up gardens in their own home. So we would provide the access to compost, seeds, and plants, as well as support and education. And the host gardeners will grow in their own home, and the return is that they will donate 20% of what they grow to their community. So that could be online, that could be to their neighbors, or it could be to the food bank, family, friends, things like that. So now that our community gardens are back up and running, the host garden program is less popular, but this year we have about 15 participants, which is really exciting. And then our most recent project is the Greenhouse and Learning Center. So you may have heard about this project. We have been in the news as well as in city council meetings lately. So we have been working on this project since 2020. We've received a grant from the Ontario Trillium Foundation to hire a staff member, which is me, as well as build a greenhouse structure. So initially, this project was going to be placed at Earl Haig Community Garden. However, we've now been moved to Woodman Community Center, which is on Gray Street. And if you're familiar with that center, they're currently renovating the pool. So there's going to be a brand new pool there, all new play structures, and of course the community center. So the location there allows us to access even more community members that we may not have otherwise been able to. And then of course there's other amenities. Hopefully we'll have a learning space there, and we'll have around 60-ish garden beds, and we're very excited for this project. The greenhouse itself will be open to the public, and community members will be able to come and learn and participate. So we want to create a bit of a community hub at this center. Myself, staff member, looking forward to being there, full time and teaching community members. And of course, we would love to host other groups and organizations and have a book club. Let's come have a picnic, So we were very excited to be establishing this community hub, and we're working very closely with the city on this project, and they're also very motivated to make this project successful and a really big asset to our community. So those are the main details of EcoGround. Myself, I'm the Greenhouse and Learning Center coordinator, so I do workshops and events and things like that with EcoGround, community partnerships, and that's exactly why I'm here today. So let's get into gardening. Before you garden, there are 4 main things that you need before you do anything. First, hydration. Make sure you have water on hand. Have liquids on hand. Gardening can be taxing. It can be very hot, especially in the height of the summer. So wherever you're gardening, make sure you have liquids with you. Make sure you have water with you. It can be very easy to get a sunstroke, actually. So that water is going to really help keep you healthy out in the sun. Of course, weather appropriate clothing. If it's a really hot day, you could opt for some cotton or even linen if available. You're definitely not putting on your winter jacket in July. You might want to put your winter jacket on today. So just be sure to check the weather forecast and just see, what kind of weather are you expecting. If it's sunny out, make sure you have a hat and sunglasses. You want to protect those eyes. Of course, you want some sunscreen. I personally cannot step outside without sunscreen. I will burn instantly. So I always have sunscreen in my purse as well. Some of our garden champions will carry sunscreen with them, because the last thing you want is to be out gardening for 2 hours and then, by dinner time, you've turned into your own tomato. And then, of course, you're going to want to stretch and prepare your body. When you're digging around in the gardens, it can be hard on the knees, it can be hard on the back, it can be very taxing on the body. So you want to make sure that you are taking an opportunity to prep your body for that. And without your body, you can't garden. So let's take care of it. So we'll just quickly go over some basic gardening skills. There's 4 ways you can really garden. You can plant in a ground. So pretty much people will strip their sod and then there they go, they have a garden bed ready. This is beneficial because it's cheap. It really doesn't cost you anything except for maybe some soil amendment. So it's not going to cost you anything to get a garden in the ground going. However, there can be more weeds. So it does require you to be out there more often pulling weeds. And then of course, soil quality is a little harder to control. If you're located in Brantford, we have very, very sandy soil here, which is we're lucky to have. We're not hauled in with a thick clay soil, which can be difficult to grow in. However, I'm on the Grand River and my backyard is full of rocks. So we can't grow root vegetables in the ground. Things like carrots or turnips, they end up coming out deformed. So planting in the ground can be cheap, but it does come with some complications. Next option is to actually plant in raised beds. So you can do this with untreated cedar. And, the benefit of this is you can make them as tall as you need to. So if you have mobility issues or if you have bad knees, by planting in raised beds, you could stand, right? Or you could have a stool. You don't necessarily need to be on the ground the entire time. Another benefit is when you're planting in raised beds, there's better quality control. So you can actually control the soil quality because you're going to get it delivered. You're going to have to fill those beds with some sort of soil. So you have a little bit more control over what's actually in the soil. A con to this is if you're using those cedar wood boards that are untreated, the boards are going to rot and you're going to have to replace them. And we know how costly lumber is right now. So planting in raised beds is not as cheap. You can purchase galvanized steel beds from various suppliers, and those will last quite a while. I will note that here at EcoGround, we technically plant in raised beds on all of our sites. However, some of them are not very high. We're currently working on replacing all of our beds with galvanized steel, and some of those beds are a little bit taller. And we're also working on getting accessible beds in at sites, especially where our greenhouse and our learning center will be. So in the coming years, you guys will notice that the beds at the community gardens will change, and we'll be working on including more accessible options. Another way to garden is container gardening. And this is great for people who have limited space. You know, if you have a patio or a balcony, you could get quite a large container, and you can grow a lot of items in containers. You know, don't think you're going to be stuck to just growing one little lettuce plant. Obviously, with container gardening, you're likely not going to be growing 18 tomatoes, so your crop is a little bit limited. But you also have limited weeds, so you're not going to have to be out there weeding. It's also much easier to water a container garden, and it can be a lot less taxing on your body. And then the fourth item is, if you're not ready to commit to a full garden, or you don't have a community garden nearby, you could consider growing on your windowsill. A lot of herbs are very happy on a windowsill, things like rosemary, thyme, basil, and then you have fresh herbs available for you for when you're cooking. When you are windowsill gardening, you have to go with crops that are okay with a little bit less light, so things like lettuces or most of the herbs. So you are quite limited when you're gardening on your windowsill, but still an option. So let's quickly talk about the 3 basic ingredients you need for growing. If you're a more intermediate or advanced grower, you know that there's a lot more to this, but this is just bare bones what a plant needs to grow. So of course you need light. Most plants need a minimum of 6 to 8 hours of sunlight. In my personal garden, our plants, honestly, on a really at the height of summer in June, or the height of the daylight that we have, my plants are probably getting 14 hours, and most of them love it. So the more light, the better, but a bare minimum 6 to 8 hours. And of course, every plant is different. You can always look at the back of your seed packet or the little slip that comes with your plants. It'll actually tell you how much sunlight that plant needs. You need soil. So your soil it provides nutrients to the plant. You know, the plant needs to eat too. It's also a vessel for water. So when we're watering the soil specifically, and then the roots of the plant are actually pulling that water up into it. And your soil needs to have good drainage. As I mentioned, we're here in Brantford, and the soil is very sandy here, so we're quite lucky. If your soil is really compact, then your roots can't grow, and also it has a hard time actually accessing the nutrients. And then, of course, all plants need water. So you always want to water when the top inch of your soil is dry, give or take. It's going to depend on the vessel that you're growing in. You can actually just take your finger and stick it into the soil, and if it feels moist, don't water it. If it feels dry, water it. These are basically what a plant's going to need. As long as you have these 3 items and a plant, you're going to get something. I don't want to hear anything about that. I don't have a green thumb. You have a green thumb. So seeds and seedlings. When it's April now, a lot of people are actually going to start getting their seedlings going. If you're planning to grow from seed, you need to start thinking about this now if you haven't already. If not, then you're going to want to think about where are you going to purchase your seedlings. So for seeds specifically, you can get them at department stores, nurseries, or seed swaps. You're probably, anytime you walk through Walmart right now or Home Depot, you see the big Mackenzie displays. If you're purchasing seedlings, or if you're planning to use seedlings, which are like the mini plants, you're going to grow those from home, or you can purchase them from the same places that you get seeds. Lots of farms will also have seedling sales. So, keep your eyes peeled and kind of decide what you want to grow and where you're going to purchase them. For actually planting into your garden, here we are in zone 6B in Brantford, and our last frost date is technically May 6th. But if you are from Southern Ontario, you know that we could get snow anytime. So most gardeners in this area will choose to plant May 2-4 weekend. That's when Eagle Ground will plant for most of the community gardens. So, when you're planning to purchase seedlings or seeds, or you're doing your garden prep, aim for May 2-4 weekend. That's always our advice. Let's talk about yard work. So, we're in the middle of April now. Of course, it's kind of cold and rainy this week, but once the sun comes back out and blesses us, you can start poking around in your gardens. For April, you want to be a little bit careful about the work that you guys are actually doing in your gardens because our pollinators are still sleeping. I actually saw a bumblebee crawl out of leaf litter the other day in my garden. And it just, again, reinforced that idea that those pollinators are still sleeping. And if we wake them up too early, they're not going to have a food source. So in April, you can consider pruning your trees and your bushes. Most trees and bushes like to be pruned just as they're waking up. Apple trees should have been done last month, but other than apple trees, everything pretty much will fall in the next, week or so if you haven't already done it. I know I'm waiting for my lavender to wake up still so I can prune that. In April, you can also consider laying mulch if that's something that you practice in your garden. You can top up your soil and you can sow cold tolerant seeds. So things like lettuce, spinach, radish, they would thrive right now in this weather. If you have seeds in your house, after this, go sow them in the garden. You'll probably have something growing pretty quick. However, do not disturb your leaf litter. Try not to mow your lawn, and don't remove any early pollen providers. So some of those plants, dandelions, I know we all grown, we don't want to see dandelions all over our uncut lawn, but ultimately those dandelions are a very important food source for the pollinators at this time of year. April, and especially when we get those good weather spurts in March even, people immediately want to jump outside. Let's rake up the leaves that we didn't get from the fall. Let's mow the lawn. Let's take out those dandelions. Ultimately, it's really negatively impacting our pollinator population. And when we think of pollinators, we think of butterflies and honeybees. And most of the butterflies migrate here and most of the honeybees are in their hives, but that's like 0.02% of the pollinators that take care of our earth. Most of them are actually solo creatures. So bumblebees, they don't have a hive or anything like that. Most of the native bee population here in Ontario doesn't have hives. So they're sleeping in that leaf litter and they're sleeping, even in the top layer of your soil. So if you can leave your gardens and leave your lawns and leave your leaf litter, do so until probably the middle of May. Typically, the pollinators are awake and moving around by then, and then you're safe to go in and complete your yard chores. So let's chat about some mobility tips. Like I said, without a functioning body, you're not going to be able to garden. So a first option is alternative beds. We talked about raised beds and container gardening. If you have knee issues or back issues, I highly recommend these two forms of gardening. It's going to require less spending and it's going to be easier on your knees and your back, and you're going to thank yourself. You can also buy extendable tools, and that includes trowels, shovels, rakes, and hoes. Essentially, they're much longer and much lighter than the typical tools that you guys are thinking of. So it'll make reaching a little bit better, especially if you have really, really wide garden beds. And then you can also consider having seats or knee protection when you're working in the gardens, especially if you are working in the ground. So you can get stools. You can also get these hard but also foam comfortable
Okay,
like.
you are on your own. I have to go.
So you can also have something firm for your knees so that they're not aching. And then you can get a rolling working seat that'll allow you to move around in your gardens. So just assess, if you guys are having mobility issues, how can you make it easier on yourself and make gardening a sustainable long-term activity? And then I'm also going to speak to a couple of maintenance tips that may help you need to spend less time doing specific tasks. So I personally practice permaculture in my garden, which means I lay down a very thick, 4-inch layer of mulch. And I actually don't usually need to weed throughout the season, and I don't need to water nearly as much. That mulch really helps with water retention and helps suppress the weeds. So I'm a really busy person in the summer, and mulch is important for me in order to continue having a garden because I cannot be in there every day weeding, and I cannot be watering my plants 3 times a day. I just simply don't have time. Landscape fabric can also be laid down underneath mulch or even underneath soil, and landscape fabric will also help suppress weeds. So if you don't have time or even the ability to do a lot of weeding, landscape fabric may be very helpful in creating that long-term sustainable hobby. In terms of watering, you can get soaker hoses, and soaker hoses essentially they water way more efficiently, and they'll flood your plants a lot quicker, so you can get watering done much faster. It also can be a little bit beneficial on your water bill as well because it's very efficient. You can also install drip irrigation, which means that your plants will automatically be watered. You don't actually have to go out and water it virtually any time. You can sow cover crop in the winter. Cover crop typically is a legume, so things like I'm trying to think like soybeans and stuff like that. Any type of bean variety will actually put nitrogen back into your soil for you over the winter, which means come spring, right now, you won't need to sow compost, or you won't need to turn compost into your garden beds. So by sowing that cover crop, it's hands off, you don't water it, and it will put those nutrients back into the soil that you're going to need for spring, and it's very hands off and low maintenance. And then of course you can plant native. So when we plant native plants to Ontario, a lot of native plants don't need consistent watering. They're designed for this area. They're designed for drought. So the more native you plant, the better experience you're going to have, and the better they're going to thrive. Let's talk about public green space within the city of Brantford. Not everybody has access to green space, or sometimes we just want out of our houses or our apartments. And Brantford has a lot of amenities. So of course we have our community gardens, both in the city of Brantford as well as Brant County. And you're always welcome to visit these community gardens at any time. They're always open. I can't guarantee there's always going to be volunteers there, but if there are, they're all friendly, community-minded people, and you can always stop in and say hello to them. Most of those gardens are in public parks, and of course public parks are public. And the city has a lot of great amenities at the parks. There's good seating and often lots of nature to experience. Being down in Brantford, we have the Grand River, of course, and that leads to a lot of trails and walking paths. Like I said, I live down by the river, and I use the trail along the dike every single day. Well, every other day. I take my dogs down, and it's just the trail system here in Brantford is very wonderful. And then of course, come next spring, we will have our greenhouse and learning center, and you guys are welcome to come by anytime. Again, this space will be open to the public all the time. I will be down there full time, maintaining the gardens, maintaining the greenhouse, and anybody who swings by, if there's a new skill that you want to learn, or even you just want to come socialize or have a cup of tea with volunteers, that greenhouse will be available to anybody. And we're hoping to open spring of 2024. For now, I will be located at Earl Haig Community Garden, which is directly next to the water park. And you're more than welcome to come down to that garden. We have 74 garden beds there, so there's always something to do. And then I will be down there very regularly throughout the summer, and I will, I'd be happy to. Again, same thing, if you want to come learn a new skill or come socialize, there'll be volunteers there quite often. There's also some other organizations within Brantford and Brant County that you guys may be interested in. There's the Brantford Food Forest. They're at Parsons Park on Ontario Street in Eagle Place, and they meet every Wednesday at 7 p.m. I would suggest that you clarify that, because of course things can change. There's Brantford Nature. They host community activities and education. They are a fairly new organization. They formed in 2022. There's the Butterfly Way Project, which is overseen by David Suzuki, their foundation there, and they're working on pollinating the globe and providing more sustainable options and a sustainable future for our pollinators. There's Belonging Brant, which is a community-led initiative. They have different groups that you can get involved in, things like book clubs and cleanup crews. They have a walking group. So if you guys are looking to engage and get out into nature, that might be a good option for you. And then of course we have the Grand River Conservation Authority. They, with the conservation area, they host a ton of different, activities and green space options. So how can you get involved with Eco Ground? You can volunteer at any of our community gardens. There's no time commitment required. You don't need to be there every day, or you don't need to be there even every week. You can choose how often you participate. As I mentioned, every garden kind of operates a little bit differently, so they're all very flexible. If you were interested in volunteering, you could always reach out to EcoGround and we could get you connected with your local garden. You can visit the gardens at any time, and you know, if you see some weeds, you can pull them, you can come harvest, and again, come socialize. And then you can also attend workshops. If you guys are looking to build on your gardening skills, we will have a variety of workshops, both virtually and in person throughout the season. And everything we do is community focused. You guys are always welcome. And let's see if this will load. So these are all of our garden locations in Brantford and Brant County. This is located on our website. You can also find it on Google Maps. You can click on any of these numbers and it's going to pull up what the garden is. So these are all the public gardens. We don't have the private ones on here because obviously there's no need. But any of these gardens, they're always looking for volunteers. They're always looking for assistance. Also, if you have a skill that you think would benefit EcoGround, please speak up. We're always welcoming community members that know more than we do because ultimately we are not master gardeners. So if you have a skill that you could lend, we would love to hear from you. So again, this is on our website. Let's see if this is going to move for us. And then this is my contact information. So I'm Taylor Edwards, the Greenhouse and Learning Center coordinator. My phone number is there. My email address is there. And you're more than welcome to reach out to EcoGround anytime if you have questions, if you're having gardening issues, if you want to get involved. If you utilize any of these numbers or emails, then you're going to reach me and I'll be able to get you connected with whatever you are looking for. So that's it from me. Thank you so much. I just left a little note there for the organizer who put together this template, this very sweet spring template. I know it doesn't reflect the weather outside, but yeah, if anybody has any reason to reach out to EcoGround, we invite you to.